You like poses and stuff, right? This sort of thing?
The pose, right? There's supposed to be a pose.
Yeah, I think so. Etc.
Let's just make sure. Oh, wait, I got a thing behind me. Why do I have a thing behind me?
Run.
Oh, because Chad is encroaching on my space.
How dare you, chat? I see you over there encroaching on John's space. Get out, get out.
My chat.
Because fuck it, I'm God in my game. I don't care. Incredible. Wonder which one of us said that.
Let's
no.
just
Oh God, no, I'm sorry, everyone.
run that right down low. There we go. That was my fault. That's my fault for not being prepared enough. Hi.
Hello.
We got the two of us here today. And honestly, I'm really happy that the two of us are here. Because again, we can't actually be in the same space. So we are doing our best to be together virtually. Quotes 2022, there is none.
What?
2022 does not exist.
Ooh.
Yeah. So hi. Also the turtle, I don't trust your hugs anymore. Not after yesterday. Not after the shit you pulled.
Oh my God. What the heck is going on over there?
I was streaming a game where called Noida, where the chat was able to vote every couple of minutes on random effects that would happen to me. Okay. And I know that the turtle was very fond of certain effects that may have made a game I'd never played before just a little more difficult.
Just a little tougher. Okay, all right, I like that. Is it because you had mentioned silly physics effects, John? I didn't get a chance to check out the game yesterday. Do you implement them yourself, or do they just kind of randomly get assigned to you? Or
well, there's a 4 that appear on screen, and then people can vote 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Okay, oh, that's really fun. That's really fun.
Yeah, no, it was a fun game. It was an interesting game, and it's by the same people who did Baba Is You, which is, a fond memories of that game.
I recently restarted it, although I never really got that far. It's really interesting to sort of get your headspace back into the logic of that game, which is wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's legitimately great. So I'm very pleased. So hey.
Hello.
I will also say hi to everybody who's out there in chat right now. I'm going to remind you that if you have questions that you want to ask, starting your post with an !Q and then a space, we'll load that into our queue, right into our suggestion queue, so it'll be easier for us to bring that up and show everybody the cool things you have to say, if indeed they are cool.
I'm trying to do my best Braum face here.
Yeah, we've got Aramithius.
Yeah. Hello.
Live. Which is pretty cool. I think yeah, that is your first time tuning in live to this.
I'm so thrilled to have people still coming to join us from different corners of the internet. I know it's an infinite space, but like you'd think at a certain point that we would just, go extinct like the dinosaurs. But there's always, just kidding.
Look, but there's always time.
There's always time.
There's always time. We could just fuck that right up right here.
That is correct. Oh, let's do it. No, there's always people coming in and finding us through various connections or through playlists on YouTube or wherever. It's really cool. It's really great. I love that, because then we get a chance to, not only do we get a chance to share what we've been up to and what we love doing, but vice versa. I get a chance to learn about people's exciting projects and passions and #passions.
#passion. Sorry, I was just checking to make sure that we did tweet, and we did. So there it is. It's out there. Oh, hey, the turtle's already got a question.
Questions.
Perfect. I mean, I just appreciate the fact that this is here right off the bat. I'll also point out, Scott, if I don't miss my guess, you can actually access the dashboard for RPG Clinic on featured.chat, so you can also bring things up.
Oh, nice. I'm going to do that now, actually, and see what happens, because I was having a heck of a time with it when I was... the couple times I've run clinic hours.
Oh, I do have to make sure, though, that the featured.chat is above our windows. There we go. So the turtle asks, how would you like us to go with our questions? I just don't want to ask about setting stuff when you aren't ready and stuff. You can ask whatever you want. We can choose not to play your question. We can also choose to play your question and say we don't know or we're not ready to talk about it yet. So I'd rather that people ask stuff that we cannot answer than for people wondering whether they could ask a perfectly reasonable question and then not actually be able to get there. So if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, throw them at us and we'll put them in the queue if we think they're not worth answering. That's not what I mean. If we think that it's going to make for some interesting discussion.
Did you need a code?
Yes, I did.
Yep, there it is.
I didn't realize, because I didn't actually request one. But it still, I guess it pinged y'all's anyway. That's funny.
Requiem Lost asks if we're having a great day. Well, we're having
yes, I am.
Yeah, we're having days. We're just having separate days. It's only now that we've merged them. I spent my day working and running 3 scenes.
I mean, that's not a bad day at all. I was rolling around in Disconcordia there for a while too. Made some food, cleaned some snow off my roof. Did not do all of the roof, unfortunately, but we're getting there.
Yeah, that's a different thing for you, huh?
Yeah, I've never had a roof before. Like, that was mine, you know, that I could access. Let's see if this works, shall we?
Let's see here. Elliespot asks, how interesting does the question have to be for you to bring it up on a scale of 1 to 5? Pi.
Nice. Or higher. Pi plus.
Yeah, we're only going for pi or plus around here.
Good answer, John.
I like how, because it's wintertime, my office is a little colder than it is usually, so now I have to wear like an undershirt under the scrubs.
Huh? Yeah, whereas I think here it's not necessarily the opposite, but unless we have the wood fire going, it's all the exterior rooms of our house that are warm because they all have electric heaters, and interior rooms don't. So if you walk towards the center of the house, it just gets colder. It's weird. It's
that's
odd.
why you got to get like a fire going.
Oh yeah, baby, you got a stew going. It's that is a good time. And there's one now. It also calms the cats. They all just chill there.
I think they're just tiny little arsonists. and the only thing that they, or pyromaniacs, I should say, not arsonists. And that they just, I think it captures them.
I mean, it's very possible. Where am I looking here? Dashboard.
So
seeing if I can actually see it.
Yeah, so if you can see it,
click
on at the top at AMA/Q&A.
What? Yes, I can.
And then see if you can pop open one of those questions.
I will. Let's see. Okay, this is the one that I'm putting up there. Did it work?
So yeah, read it out.
Oh yeah, of course. So just because I felt like this was a good question to start with, because I know we can answer this. In terms of gaming tone, are you sticking to RP role-playing heavy style, or moving toward a more combat/mechanics focused game?
I think you can handle this one.
I think so too. We play what we all enjoy playing, and that has always been a role-play heavy style. So games that involve a lot of and we're going to talk, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, John, what we love in a game, and what will probably make its way into our new campaign, our new season rather. Moments of high action and high drama, moments of relaxed beach episodes, if you will, but throughout it all, developing relationships, friction between characters, interpersonal relationships. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I'm not saying we're not going to move towards a more combat / mechanics game, because game systems have mechanics for reasons, and typically they improve the fun, at least if they're well implemented. Yeah, there you go.
That makes sense. Avatar of Cain I'm gonna bring this question up, even though I don't think you're gonna be thrilled with the answer. What's been the most fun part of going from Rokugan to NeoRokugan so far? And the answer is, I guess, this chat. This is kind of like our stepping stone. So I'll remind people, or at least let people know, for the benefit of those who aren't necessarily up to date on what's going on here. Our next major campaign is planned to be a Legend of the Five Rings campaign that actually we've taken the setting and we are doing a kind of transplant. We're changing it up for ourselves to make it a cyberpunk setting, which we are specifically we're calling NeoRokugan. I think I actually have the logo, which I can show.
Nice.
On
John
screen.
has had a previous clinic hours where I know you discussed some of the reasons behind that. I want to just like jump in really quick to say one of the reasons for that is we've always wanted to play in a cyberpunk setting. I mean, most of us, all of us, I think it's been expressed as like something that we wanted to do for a long time. And if you want to do something and you have the opportunity to do it, do you know what I mean?
Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what I mean, Gav? So that's gonna that's my character, by the way, Gus the Paperboy. Sorry, Neo Paperboy.
Oh,
my
boy.
apologies.
Gus the Neo Paperboy. I'm gonna hold you to that now.
Please don't. Please don't. I would actually hate that. I would remove my character from the game. Anyway, yeah. But there's also a bunch of other reasons which have to do for the transplanted setting, which have to do with problematic elements of the setting that we feel it might have, making sure it can be well represented, doing something different. I mean, anyway, look, I'm not going to get into that. You had a whole clinic hours about it.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'd use the word problematic so much as I'd use the term to help level out the amount of cultural appropriation that we're doing, considering that we're also streaming it for a live audience and for a permanent worldwide presence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I'm at with it. The reason why it's here in this chat is that we were planning on running it in months, starting in April. Now we don't know. It could be earlier or later, and the main reason why we don't know is because we were originally delaying because we had work conflicts that was going to make it difficult for us to have the four of us regularly present over the course of the first few Sundays in the months of January, February, and March. We kind of prefer for our major campaigns, our long-running campaigns, to make sure that we're not like running 2 sessions and then immediately needing to drop a player for a second.
Yeah.
But then Quebec has been massively hit by the Omicron variant, and therefore a lot of in-person work is no longer legal. And so therefore we no longer have that barrier, but we also can't get together.
Right.
And there's a question, because if I know that I much prefer playing with you and with Elizabeth when you're actually in the same room.
Me too. We've also discussed this at length. We've had a lot of fun doing some of our between season one shots, the Star Wars game that we played Age of the Empire that we played for a while, but something about being at a distance made it challenging. Part of Exalt Academy season 1, if I'm not mistaken. Am I mistaken?
No.
Part of that was done at a distance as well. Yeah.
Yes.
it's yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So yes, ideally we'd love to be able to be in the same room together when we start, but that might be sooner than expected. It might also be later than expected. It might also be exactly when we expect it, much like a wizard.
Yeah. A wizard is never late. Yeah, all of season 1 wasn't in the same room. We basically we were delayed quite a bit until we were able to do that in the same room, and we just don't know. We don't know how long this lockdown is going to last. We both of our households are relatively isolated. So if it was legal for us to get together, I think we probably would, because we just don't have a whole lot of contact with the outside world. We're all up to date on vaccinations and the like. It's just, we also don't want to commit crimes.
Well, unless it's within the context of a role-playing game and everyone's all green card about it.
That is true. That is true. So the reason why I don't have more about like, oh, what has the process been like, is because the process didn't start. We didn't, or at least it's kind of been minor. My first sort of thing upon coming on with a new setting is actually to understand the mechanics first. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've been focusing on, is going over this puppy.
Yeah.
And making sure that I had a good understanding of the base mechanics, so that when I'm developing the setting, I can make sure that it matches those mechanics as best I can.
Yeah, there's also, I don't think we're going to necessarily get into it today, John, because I know there's a lot more work that we want to do developing and testing as well. But there were some, or at least you were proposing some setting changes, which I thought were really exciting, to try to not just modernize, but sort of, bring into a new setting certain elements of L5R that I think are going to make for... I think it's going to make it very cool, and will also affect potentially how the PCs are within the universe, which is also very cool.
Yeah,
it wasn't something I was expecting, but I'm talking very obliquely. I know,
but
we haven't sat down about it.
Part of what we're doing today is we're going to talk. I mean, we'll answer questions as we get to them and stuff. But one of the things that I did want to do today is ask you about our previous campaigns and what you are looking forward to and what you might be less looking forward to in terms of both a cyberpunk setting, a highly fictionalized samurai setting, the mixture of the two, right?
Yeah.
Because as I develop what is kind of the baseline, I want it to be still a collaboration, right? I want to make sure that whatever I come up with isn't something that's going to immediately turn you off.
100%.
So that's, and we're doing it in front of other people because we are suckers for punishment.
We like to have our decisions judged publicly before we have a chance to think about them.
See, there you go. Now you're understanding.
Now we're thinking with...
Now you're thinking with portals.
Portals. There you go. Blake Bortles. What? Should we start with Cyberpunk versus Samurai, or should we start with previous campaigns?
So I'm going to say the reason why I want people to use the !Q to get your questions is because I still want to answer these questions, but we have some other things to discuss first. So if we don't get to your question right away, please be aware that it is in the queue. We do see it. We'll be able to call it up later on when we feel like it's appropriate. But we're also going to get the conversation rolling. If you have questions about what we're immediately talking about, you can ask those as well. Or if you have questions that you're like, when you get to it, go ahead and throw them in the queue. We'll get to them. Hopefully. we both have plans at like 7:30, so we should.
Definitely. I should also eat before that, but that's
exactly.
Me. Don't worry.
So
Don't
like we're done at 7. So let me ask first, in terms of our previous campaigns, we're talking about Exalted Nexus, Changeling the Streaming. We also have Star Wars Reach, and then Exalted Academy. Of those that we have, what are some of the things that you kind of miss from those campaigns, or things that you especially want to make sure that we have going forward with this next one?
Absolutely. Something that I believe we've even discussed publicly, but it's definitely where I want to start because it's present in my mind, is the idea of having a home base. And rather than say in a I should just kind of mention, I'll try not to do like a big spoiler for any of our previous campaigns for people who haven't watched. There may be elements and I'm going to try not to, be too bad about them. But, Academy, for example, was set up, I think, to have a central location. It didn't necessarily turn out that way. And the central location was quite large. There you go, Written. I loved in Changeling the Streaming specifically, and Nexus to a certain extent, having a more manageable space that you could theoretically kind of live in a way, be a central location. That way, kind of, if there's nothing else that your character wants to accomplish at any given time, where the people will be that you want to interact with, right? You don't have to go hunt for them, so to speak. I also, something that really drew me to Blades in the Dark setting, which again was a sort of planned mini campaign.
Yeah, maybe it might still happen.
Well, planned, capital P. Something that drew me to that setting is the idea that your gang has a hideout, and again, it's such a way of injecting character. I really find myself coming to life when in a role-playing game when my character can live within a world that is got a lot of flavor, if that makes sense.
Right.
I find that, if there's decisions I haven't made or things I haven't thought about, they're often brought out almost immediately if I know what my space is and who's there and what my relationships to them are, etc. So that would be the first thing, something I really enjoyed about our previous campaigns that I hope to see a return of.
I might even go so far as to say that you prefer settings that are created and shaped a little more by you than by something that's already been established. We ran into that with Star Wars Reach, but we also, to a certain degree, there's a little bit of that that we can see in Exaltwitch, where if a setting is already kind of like, well, you should know everything about it because there's so much information out there about it already, then it doesn't quite resonate as much with us as something that we've kind of had a hand at building up ourselves. So
that's it, right? Like I'm not necessarily, as those who watch the channel will know, I'm not necessarily a stickler for getting everything right, factually correct all the time in my life or in my games. But
who is?
Well, it's true. It's true. It's just like, if I'm going to have my character do something to a setting, create something to put on the wall, burn down a building, I don't know, whatever, I don't also then want to flip through all the lore in my head and go, okay, is this going to irrevocably like break the game? Irrevocably, that's the word. I'd much rather know the place that we're creating and sort of get a feel for it and go, okay, this is the touch I want to make. We got a chance to build, CTS, Changeling the Streaming, was a very long game. There were many sessions, so we got a real chance to explore new locales and even create some, which was really lovely. So that stands out to me, certainly.
All right, so we've talked about home bases. Anything else in specific? Is there anything that you're also kind of saying, like, I've had my fill of this? Maybe it's not something you hate, but something that you're just like, I kind of want to put this aside for now?
I'm going to contemplate that briefly.
You're allowed.
As I have a look.
You're allowed to think, I guess.
Oh, thanks, John. This is very specific, but because of the setting, I think I can bring it up. I really enjoy when we have interactions with non-player characters that are not human. And to go a little bit beyond that, I don't mean, oh, well, you know, Cathane, like, are you really human? I mean more so, you know, living entities, spirits inside vehicles or whatever, animate statues, I don't know, anything like that. I find that really cool. And given a cyberpunk setting, I don't think that's impossible. So that excites me, certainly. I'm thinking back as well to something that was not streamed on this channel, John, but Full Party, which we both participated in, had an alchemical, Exalt, who I thought was a fascinating character, sort of discovering something about that. Very cool.
Yeah, I liked that. I like that alchemical. I like that quite a bit.
We might bring it back. Who knows?
Yeah, that'll be the thing that ties everything together. Is I just throw an alchemical into an
exactly.
L5R Cyberpunk
what?
game.
Wait a
Why
second.
fucking not?
They're all tied together now.
All right, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You enjoy exploration of the self along with exploration of a space.
This is something that is common to essentially all of the role-playing games we've ever done. So I barely even have to mention it, but I do enjoy getting to see other PCs, my own PC, other NPCs,
Naked.
develop. Right. I was going to say develop romantic relationships. Yeah, exactly. I do have to see them naked. Sorry. We'll allow it. But there is something really, I mean, it kind of goes without saying because that's like pretty on brand for this channel, having people get into relationships of the romantic variety specifically. But I would be very happy to see that make a return as well.
Relationships, home bases. It seems like you basically want like a home simulator.
I just don't like my home, John. I want to. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
Boy. Oh boy. All right.
Really quick, sorry, because
Sure.
you also asked something about things that I maybe have had my fill of. I think for now, to a certain extent, I've had
My fill of John as a storyteller.
my fill of John. Quit. See you later. Oh my God, The Sims. I love it. No, I think we've played quite a few campaigns set specifically in the world of Exalted, in the universe rather, where you play an Exalt, a demigod, someone who's been, exalted by a deity to do their will on Earth or creation. I'm really interested in kind of going back to not a more mundane existence in role-playing, but someone who has to work harder to get where they want to go. I'm not, again, like, I understand in L5R there are really cool like kata and like techniques and stuff, and I'm really jazzed to look into those further.
But you want to be on the struggle.
Exactly. I want to be working up, not already up, kind of not punching down, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't need like earth-shattering cataclysmic battles every day anymore.
Player characters often are stronger than your average person, right? That's part of the fantasy. You get to be special. But what I'm hearing here is you want to be special, but you also don't want to be starting at the top. You don't want to basically either have to defend the status quo, or even be the person who has the most power to change the status quo. You want to become a person who can change the status quo, perhaps.
I love that. It might, like, I think something that really stood out to me, about Changeling the streaming is how much some of the story arcs were very grand, and grand in the sense of like scale and scope, not in like, wow, that was grand.
Or, hey, there's Grand Boulevard.
Great storyline, John. That was nice. Let's go take a walk. It's there were some storylines that would affect a whole kingdom of people, and then there were some storylines that was like, this guy's sad. This guy really wants to like talk to his parents again or whatever.
Right.
And something more personal. I love having both of those to kind of go back and forth between.
Yeah, it's true that Exalted doesn't lend itself as well to those sort of situations because of the game's focus on pushing you to go further, do more, do something with your exaltation, as opposed to stay home, watch the kids.
Well, I'm gonna watch those kids so hard. Activate. What is it called? Ray had a charm at a certain point. Eye of the Sun, or what? I don't know what it was called now, but like, anyway, good times.
So we've been getting a bunch of questions about Cyberpunk. So why don't we move on to that?
Yeah.
And let me first ask what drives you for. Actually, no. Let me even say, what do you define Cyberpunk as?
I see it as a setting which is generally set in the near future. It's characterized by a lot of noir themes in my mind. It's often characterized by a struggle of the individual against the corporate machine of the world, or the institution, not against the societal order, shall we say. It typically involves heavy focus on technology because it's set in the near future. What else? There's often like in my mind, it's got like a 80s sheen, but that's something.
A lot of neon, a lot of
neon, a lot of sick synthwave beats. But that's
a lot
again,
of pinks
that's how
and blues.
That's how I see it personally. But it's not always like that.
So it turns out I actually was made aware of this on Twitter today. It turns out that the upcoming Magic set that's coming out, there was a Magic set that came out a long time ago, like 20 years ago, called the Kamigawa block, which was very heavily Japanese themed. And the set that's coming out soon is Kamigawa, but near future.
Interesting.
Right? I had no idea about
well,
this.
That's I think we call that kismet.
Right?
Right? Yeah.
Right?
That's That's pretty cool though.
So it's kind of in the zeitgeist right now, I suppose. Yeah, so the way that I think that we're kind of defining it is very much what you just said. It's a near future world that has a certain amount of technology to it with film noir overtones, as opposed to it being directly what the original kind of concept of cyberpunk was. In much the same way that the World of Darkness was originally considered gothic punk, but the punk aspect, the idea of rebelling against authority, isn't as highlighted, I think, in our game. Not that it isn't going to appear at all, but for instance, in Cyberpunk Red, which is the more recent release of Cyberpunk 2020, Cyberpunk Red, it's very nihilistic.
Yeah.
It's very much like the world's going to shit. There's not much you can do about it. So smash things and get rich while you can. And then, until you basically die is sort of how that comes up. And I don't think that's the kind of game I just want to play right now. Not in this sort of situation. Yeah, right now the World of Darkness is more appealing than the real world.
Wait a second.
So here we'll an appropriate question as called up by Written as Wrote. Hello. Are you just going to not appear? Are you just not going to work?
Did I?
You can.
I'm
try
not
it.
somehow. Yeah. Is it
At the very bottom?
Boop. Oh.
Nope. No. Featured chat has decided to
classic.
suck.
I'm gonna just reload it and see what happens.
Yeah, right. Okay, here we go. Log in. No, it's thinking about things.
Oh, yeah, it's not happy. Okay.
It's thinking about things. Okay, it looks like the service went down. That's fine. Is our Oh, no. You're letting me log in again?
Thank you, Written. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Written. There you go. Will there be heavy political overtones a la the anti-corporate messaging for a majority of Cyberpunk stories? Was that something that interests you?
I do like political stories. I really do. Sorry, I don't mean, political news stories, although I try to stay informed, but I do mean stories that have a certain level of intrigue to them and societal kind of change themes. I will say that's because we're streaming the game, because it's live, we have to be very careful, or else we end up perhaps taking stands that are pretty strong, which is fine. Like, I think everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and I certainly feel like the four of us share quite a few of those. But I'm not saying we have to be cautious necessarily. I don't want to voice something even in character and sort of make judgment calls and value calls that make people feel bad about themselves. I guess that's inevitable.
By people,
to a certain
you mean
extent.
the audience?
The audience, yeah, the
Okay.
audience.
Because you're going to make some people feel bad in the game universe. That's kind of how it goes.
It is true. We have our safety tools for the four of us, though, right? Like,
It's true.
If we start to feel like we're getting towards something that's going to be hurtful, or perhaps that line has been crossed or whatever. Anyway, that's my thought. I wouldn't want anything. There are certain lines, I think, that we need to establish if we're going to be looking at politics,
Yeah.
which I think is inevitable.
I don't think we're running this game with the intention of delivering a powerful message about today's modern world.
Well put.
But at the same time, I think that we sort of, in doing these games, a lot of the time we are doing a little bit of creating parts of the world that we're interested in seeing. And I'm going to say that that doesn't mean parts of the world we want to see. It's parts of the world we're interested in seeing. And oftentimes it ends up being we try to do things in a moral fashion that we consider interesting and for the better. It's part of the reason why a lot of games contain a lot of stereotypes. It's specifically designed that way so that player characters can fight stereotypes. But I don't necessarily want to say, well, I don't want you to play a character that is comfortable with murder because I believe murder is wrong. Like, I don't think that's the kind of game that we're looking at, right? Like, this is a fantasy game. It has, a fantasy overtone to it, and that's going to be there as well.
Very true.
I'm only smart on some occasions, co-defenders.
Yeah.
I would never say most.
Sort of, you get 7 days in a week. I say pick 3 or 4 out of 7. It's pretty good.
So what about Cyberpunk? Beyond that original definition, what about it kind of excites you? What's stuff about this kind of part of the setting that you're interested in going for?
Intrigue is the one that comes to mind right away. I know we just had that word come up in the conversation we just had, but the idea that noir themes tend to revolve around mystery. They tend to revolve right around not just conflict between people, but conflicts because of a crime or a criminal intent or a mystery. I'm with you, Ellie Spot, for sure. So I love the idea of playing in a game where we get a chance to really dig into mysteries and hunting down answers to them. That excites me. I think the possibilities offered by a near future sort of technology is also really cool. I know we say this a little bit from time to time, John, but certain plays have to be set when they were written, because otherwise people would just pick up their phones and call each other and that's the end of that play, right? For example, there's something about
it's what's known as an idiot plot. An idiot
Uh,
plot only works if everybody is like everybody involved at some point just completely forgets about something basic.
Right.
A lot, and an idiot plot doesn't necessarily mean a bad plot, but it often does. A lot of romantic comedies are idiot plots because, like you said, you can literally just be like, oh yeah, no, I wasn't cheating on you, I was getting your surprise birthday party ready with this, wedding counselor, as opposed to,
also our shirts got wet, that's why they're off, whatever it was.
Right, like there are reasonable explanations for what a lot of romantic comedies basically try to say.
Thank you, Super Dylan.
Oh, Super Dylan. Let's get that alert up here so that we can see it. There we go. Thanks, Super Dylan.
That's so the possibilities offered by technology really excite me. I think there's as you are well aware, John, I'm a big fan of the universe of Android Netrunner and some of the technological themes contained within, right? There's a whole corporation that produces like bioroids to do certain jobs in society, and there's another corporation that like clones people to do certain jobs in society, and so on. And the having to being able to rely on cool new technologies and think outside the box and say, what if I built something like this, is really, that excites me as well.
And I would agree with that. I do think that one of the themes that I'm interested in looking at is the nature of other in society, other intelligence. Whether that's artificial intelligence, you mentioned in terms of the world of Android, the concept of a bioroid or a clone. Bioroids being essentially androids. It should be pointed out that android is a gendered term. An android is a male robot.
Right. Androgynous, right? Same root word.
Yeah, a female would be a gynoid.
Makes sense.
As in,
that's good to know.
Yeah, but they went with bioroid, which is like a mixture of biological and mechanical.
And roids.
And roids. Gotta get those roids out.
Yep.
So, I'm not sure if necessarily I don't know what terms we're going to be using, but the idea that there are other intelligences is part of the melding of these two settings that we're going for at this point. The idea that what would be called kami or gods in L5R are actually artificial intelligences that humans created and lost control over. And they have since basically ascended themselves above humanity.
Pretty cool.
Anthronoid.
Which I think is just such an interesting concept that will have big ramifications for the setting as well.
Yeah.
If suddenly humanity is not at the top of the totem pole, is not at the top of like the hierarchy, as it were.
The concept of the singularity is kind of what we're looking at here. The singularity is the idea that at some point our artificial intelligences that we're developing will become sufficiently advanced that they get away from us. Not necessarily in like they'll take over the planet and kill us, but more that to the point where then they will start iterating and creating on their own, self-evolving, as opposed to requiring our intervention. The code learns to code in a creative, self-fulfilling manner, as opposed to just neural nets.
Not to necessarily change the subject, something else I should mention that I think goes hand in hand with something I am excited about, which is like intrigue and mystery. Something that figures big into a cyberpunk setting in my mind is crime. The fact that like, right? You could potentially play a very upstanding, honorable citizen, but most representations of cyberpunk settings don't like, people get roped into crime, whether or not they're, gangland criminals or whatever themselves.
Right.
People sometimes have to turn to like the black market for certain things that they can't get, or et cetera, et cetera. It's very cool.
One of the themes of L5R is the idea of social class as well. The concept that there are samurai and there are normal people, and then there are people who are below normal people. I'm not sure how we're going to look at that at the moment, but I do know that you bringing up crime is kind of important, because one of the things that is my intention going forward is that the concept of Bushido, as laid out in L5R, the fact that it has multiple different sort of, here, actually, I have a book.
Let's have a look at it. I have a digital copy. I will have a look at that too. Here we go.
So if we are specifically looking at the tenets of Bushido, I believe it's on page 13. I think it's like right at the start.
It is very early on, yeah.
And this, I really hope the binding on this book is decent. So the Code of Bushido specifically mentions compassion, courage, courtesy, duty and loyalty, honor, righteousness, sincerity. And it is my interpretation that the AI are based around these tenets, and that the concept of things like honor and glory are actual scores maintained by the artificial intelligence or artificial intelligences, so that it's less of an abstract concept. I don't know if necessarily people are going to be able to like look at a monitor and say, "Oh, my honor went up 5 points." I don't know. Maybe they will. We'll see.
Maybe. Check your pad every morning,
But the concept is that as players, you're not necessarily going to be ultimately defined by your honor or your glory, but it will still matter because the AI care about it. So the way that I picture it, there are some people who follow the Code of Bushido because they genuinely believe in it, because I think you can. There are some people who deliberately follow the Code of Bushido only because it gives them social standing, even though they themselves personally don't care for it. There are people who try to get away with not following the code, hoping that they won't be caught, or that they won't suffer the risk of having their scores lowered. But the AI is very close to omnipresent. So and each of the clans all care about different tenets of Bushido. And these clans basically are formed off of these AI, right? That they are humans who don't necessarily, I don't know if worship is the correct term, but they're clans that basically are devoted to these AI. And they'll keep the same names: lion, crab, scorpion, that sort of thing, to help keep people firmly with one foot planted in L5R and 1 foot planted in Cyberpunk. And that these are concepts going forward that the player characters are going to have to decide how much of it they value, because there are advantages to valuing them, but they may not choose to all the time.
What I find intriguing about this, John, which is I know it is by design, and I think it's going to open up a big conversation when we get into our episode 0 or whatever. In L5R, because you become a samurai because you subscribe to the Code of Bushido, or choose not to subscribe to all of it, or choose to hide that you don't subscribe to part, etc.
You're a samurai because of your social class.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. But I mean, like, it's almost an intrinsic part of your being, as opposed to having it be an outside force dictated by something outside of the social class of which you are a part. I just find that really, I find it very different and intriguingly so. It really might change the setting quite a bit. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, and Kung Fu Thunderous has mentioned the Chinese social credit system. Ellie Spot kind of threw that in there as well. It could be something to look for inspiration and what implications it could have for society. This is something that also, very deliberately, I'm not planning on making the game a commentary on social scores, but I think it could definitely tie in. The reality of the world is that we all carry a score. We all do, depending on where you live. It's just not necessarily as quantified. Things like if you have a criminal record, if you have an educational degree, your work experience, your volunteer experience, your religion, your family life. All of these things are taken into account, not just by individuals, but by society as a whole. It's easier for me to get a job because I'm not a convicted felon. It's easier for me to get this grant because I identify with this group, right? Like one of the things that we have encountered back when we were looking at grants for continuing a web series we were both involved in, is that some grants were only available to people of certain cultures. There were grants, for instance, to support Jewish filmmakers. Mm-hmm. And then the question is it appropriate to apply for these grants knowing that the project has nothing to do with Judaism? And then you realize that they don't actually care if it's about Judaism. It's just because it's a cultural outreach and they're trying to support people in their own community. And then the question is, how many people on the crew have to be Jewish for it to matter? Like there were
that opens up a whole
big questions. Yeah. Right. And then, and Written as Wrote also mentions things like Reddit karma. That is a social system that matters. Yeah. Hey, I've got access to the dashboard again. Look at that. It's back. It's back. So yeah, I do think that a lot of these things are interesting questions to bring out. And it's a way for us to keep playing with the systems that are involved in the book, mm-hmm. because I want to change as little of the system as possible. House ruling a system, overwriting it entirely, it gets a bit difficult. And I'm interested to see if we can do that without it.
We tend to, the players on Clinic, we tend to make cheat sheets for some of the more usual roles we have to make or whatever. We've referred to them many times. I'm sure you've even seen them on some of our games. The idea of having house rules means that you could put them on your cheat sheet. But as soon as you're changing the whole system, then there's no longer a book to refer to if it goes beyond what you have on your 2-pager, your 4-pager, whatever. And I'm with you, John. I'd much rather be able to open up a book and go, okay, it says this word, but I know we're meaning this word. But the mechanic is still roll these dice, do these things.
Armithius, that is exactly what we're trying to do, is translate Bushido and Honor into a cyberpunk setting. We're kind of tying it to the idea of a social credit. But
as implemented by, like, Kami.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like Kami. Like
but
sort of
they may refer to themselves as Kami. We
don't know yet.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea is exploring it, because I also don't necessarily want to come right out and say social credit is bad, because we've actually been dealing with social credit all our lives. No trouble, Aramithius. None at all. But yeah, so that is the idea, that we're going to try to do that. Let's see if there's any other specific questions. So Celtic Knots asks, have you decided how you're handling the clans? Will they be megacorps, or are you sticking with the feudal model? They're not going to be corporations. I don't believe that that's what we're necessarily going for. But they're instead going to be groups that are affiliated with a certain AI that has some control over the area. It is also implied that NeoRokugan is going to be not a country with individual small villages, but could in fact be one massive city. Now, massive city with natural areas involved within and all, but we'll see. We haven't specifically figured that out yet. So we've already answered about the political overtones and anti-corporate messaging. Bilbo Swaggins asks, will there be ethical/moral dilemmas that later affect the whole of the world? So what would you ask? What would you want to answer to this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of obliquely mentioned this before. I do think that can be fascinating. I'm excited to play in a campaign where, as we discussed as well, where we don't have PCs who have the ability to just change all of society immediately, regardless of what their goals are, because their goals might be much bigger. But if you don't have the ability to just kind of take large enough actions to change society as a whole, those ethical conundrums that you're talking about tend to be a lot more individually focused, right? Oh, well, what's a good example? Just okay, I have to, I really need money in order to be able to restore this charitable project I'm working on. Where am I going to get the money? Well, the quickest money is this more or less victimless crime I could commit with my compatriots. That's an individual quandary, but if we take those far enough, there may end up being implications for the whole universe. I'd be curious to start smaller, at least at first, and probably have hints of things that are bigger that we're building towards.
That makes some sense. Oh, I've popped myself out of existence. Hold on. Let me just bring myself back here.
Whoa.
Come on. Come back. I expand the wrong window and everything goes to hell. There we go. Now I'm back. So this also ties into the turtles question, which is, on a scale of mundane to earth-shattering, how much do you plan for the actions of the players to shape the world? And I think the answer is kind of both. I think there very well could be actions that contain great ramifications for the city, but I don't think that that's going to be a constant expectation. It's not going to be an all-the-time thing.
Yeah, Exalted is heavy on my mind because, of course, that's what we most recently played. But as we've discussed before, the setting of Exalted implies that because you have the power to do something, that your goals should be grand, they should be large in scope, and that you should have some sort of relationship to the status quo. I think you said that earlier as well, John. Whether or not you want to burn it down, start it from scratch, the assumption is that you are going to take it on in
burn
one
it
way
down.
or another.
Burn it all down.
Burn it all down. Whereas I think here, perhaps the assumption is that, well, I'm too small fry to do anything about that, at least for now. Although perhaps there will be implications as we move forward. Very cool.
So Written as Wrote has asked a very interesting question. First, added some typos. Second, asked the question again, but then included reposted for typos in the message. You want to try that one more time, Written as Wrote?
Big fan, Written. Big fan. Tear down Tinseltown. Oh, whoa, Arabana. I can't say something like that on this channel. What do you come on?
I mean, you can.
I could. Hollywood's paid my bills.
Written as Wrote asks if this campaign will have a sushi session instead of a froyo session. I do like sushi.
Yeah, as someone who no longer eats fish, I still really like sushi. So yes, please.
Sushi is the rice. It's not the fish.
That's true. That's true. Tends to come with certain kinds of fish. That said, though, I mean, I'm down. I guess what I'm saying, I'm down is what I'm saying. Let's do it.
Not sure. One of the things that I will say is that as much as we are taking inspiration from a setting that is a fictionalized Eastern campaign, one thing that we're going to be very clear on is that we're not trying to appropriate culture too much. It is not my interest to kind of play this game where, every time bad guys show up, you hear a gong or anything like that, right? Like,
yeah.
We're, just cram Inari in my face all day.
Legitimately.
Just
cram it in there.
I would go, honestly, I would, except that the best Japanese grocery store that I know of is closer to my parents, and I was going to go, and now I have no reason to go out there anymore. But if I go, I'll actually give you a call first to see if you want me to pick up any of that stuff, because
I have a half dozen things on my list, actually, John, and I also no longer live near the Korean grocer that we used to live near. So
yeah, because oh man, give me those frozen Inari sheets too that you can just defrost and just get some toasted sesame seeds. Pour them.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
damn it! Oh. Now I'm hungry.
Right?
No, we're good.
All right, Written as Wrote. Here we go. Will the tech be previous to or post a fossil fuel paradigm? Will it be clean energy?
That is fascinating. I feel like the image of smokestacks in the distance, like sort of an industrial part of town, as it were, is it's very noir, and therefore it's also very cyberpunk in my mind. Flip side, I don't like fossil fuels. I don't like them at all. I understand why they exist, but both physically why they exist and also what they're used for. The kingdom of Rokugan is on the ocean, if I'm not mistaken, John. Yeah, I have to get my map out here and now have a look at it. It's an island. Okay, even better.
I think.
Maybe the west. It doesn't matter. I have to find my map.
No, it's a peninsula.
Cooling towers.
Sorry, I used the wrong. Yeah, it's not an island.
Monster Island. I thought you said it was a misleading term.
It is isolated. It is cut off. It is the Shadowland to the south and the Burning Sands to the north.
Yeah. Right, you can't leave essentially.
It's effectively an island.
Right. Yeah, but exactly. Some bits of it are coastal. I'm imagining massive, potentially wind turbines or tidal energy creation technology out to sea. There might be certain parts of society that choose to live without much electricity so as to avoid the AI. Perhaps I'm just spitballing here.
Yep.
I think that's fascinating. The technology of the near future, we can kind of create anything we can dream of. Maybe fusion is a possibility. I don't know, man.
One thing that I will say is that there are plans to make sure that we are limiting the amount of tech in order to make it fit still with the system.
Oh yes, fair.
The intention is that the players will still most likely be using weaponry, for instance, that's very similar to what you'd find in L5R. People will be carrying swords and armor. And part of the reason for that is that AI are generally going to be distrusting of certain technologies, such as combustion. So things like guns don't exist.
Right. That's because there's no rules provided for them, mechanically speaking, in L5R.
That's right.
So why bother making up rules if you don't need to?
So weaponry will still absolutely be a thing, but they will be more, what is the difference between a sword and a vibro sword, right? There isn't one except for flavor. Players may have access to bows, which will be their projectile weapons, but they may not be, exactly like a bow, a string, an arrow. There may be other ways to represent them, but they're not necessarily going to be crossbows are part of are part of the setting. So crossbows may be a thing, or maybe they will shoot bolts of light or lasers or whatever. We're still working that out, but that's part of the intention. The other thing is that communication and access to things like the internet also end up being a question as well, because if there's one thing that I know, I don't want to make it so easy that you can just be like, I don't know the answer to this, but I do have a phone that has the sum collection of world knowledge at my fingertips at all times. So there may be issues with the network communication as each of these AI have sort of splintered away from each other. There may be times where communication is open and times when it is closed. We have to figure that out. I'm a fire in my laser.
Excuse me.
Yeah. So we are hoping to make sure that the level of tech is defined. I don't want players to constantly be like, oh, does a toaster oven exist in this universe? Okay. Well, what about a car? Okay. Well, is the car electric or not? Right. I don't want that to be a constant question, but I also want to make sure that we don't render some of the mechanics completely obsolete. We do have plans to allow for magic in the setting, but the magic is essentially, instead of it being you making pacts with kami to manipulate spirits or spiritual energy, you are a hacker, and you are hacking the various small AI around you to create effects that you need. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of L5R specifically, but I'll give you a very basic example for people who may be completely new to the setting. If there was an ability, for instance, to say shoot fire, instead of it being you magically conjure fire and it goes out, it would be more you have a skull clamp in the back of your head that you can interface with a local AI to create a similar effect by rupturing a conduit that runs underneath the ground in order to send fire.
Yeah, again, right? I started to jump in, John. Like, I think the intention that we'll find a really nice, concise way of making clear to people who tune in for the first time, the intention is to leave as much of the mechanics of the book of L5R intact. And we're not hand waving everything, because I think there's going to be really cool flavor to be discovered in how to do that. But if the book says I can like channel currents of air, I can.
You'll be able to.
Yeah, exactly. Cool stuff.
So I will say the turtle, I am aware that there are guns in later core books. My current plan is to hope that we only need to use the core. That we do not need to pull from other books. Often because other books are very heavy on adding to the setting. And since we're kind of crafting a setting whole cloth, I don't want to make it more complicated than it needs to be. So I'm probably not going to be calling upon a lot of extended stuff in order to build this universe, in which case, if I can ignore guns, I will. So we will see. Ermithius asks a question that's quite pertinent to this. If AI is much of a thing as you're saying here, will nanites facilitate more magical effects? Absolutely. That's a great.
There you go.
It's a great concept of it, right? People have asked in the past whether we're going to have the idea of net running, for instance. We're not developing a separate rule set for it, right? If somebody is hacking, they're hacking, but there isn't going to be we're not going to then shift the scene so that there's this entire sub game that's happening at the same time while someone runs through code. We're most likely not going to be doing something quite along those lines. To me, hackers are shugenja in the book. The concept of people who have learned to manipulate mystical energies. They're people who have learned to manipulate the code. But it's becoming harder and harder to do so as the AI further and further evolve the code past the point where humanity can understand it.
Right.
What, you don't want a totally different decking rule set like Shadowrun has? Fuck no, I don't.
I opened up Shadowrun. I wanted to love it so much. I did. And then it was like, if you want to play a Netrunner, go here. Ka-chunk. I was like, oh no, that's what I want to do. It just, yeah, again, different strokes for different folks, right? So to speak. I love a good crunchy system up to a point.
So Kung Fu Fenders mentioned cyberspace can be done with the spirit world. Yes. But that to me, that's not the same to me as the concept of a totally different decking rule set. That's what I mean. I don't want Shadowruns running because it just changes the game so fundamentally, and it also divides a group. It basically is saying one person gets to play this minigame and everyone else plays a different game.
Well, and then you're running both. Somehow,
yeah,
you know what I mean, so to speak.
So that isn't. So yeah, that's a better way of saying what I'm trying to say. So thank you, Kung Fu Fenders, for making that clear. We're not doing a separate rules interface for that, but it's not that players will be disallowed from the concept of cyberspace. That'll be tied into the idea of the spirit world. And in terms of the turtle recommends Celestial Realms. So the thing is, if there's suggestions that people want to put out there, absolutely. And if people want to pull mechanics from other books, that's fine. But I am intending to make certain limitations, like the idea of guns. But also, if a book says, hey, arquebuses exist, but it's considered like foreign and not okay, then maybe guns will exist in this format. But using one is considered, bad mojo, right? So it's not that I'm closing off the rest of the books, it's that I'm absolutely not requiring them. And I'd rather not bring in setting stuff from the extra books unless they can be easily ported over to us, and only if we need it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work to be done here.
As it is, yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. But the other thing is access to the books, right? We're very privileged in the fact that we have enough subscribers that we can improve the stream and keep going and the like, and that's great. But we also live in a place where sometimes when we order something, it's very expensive. This core book is not cheap. The other books are equally not cheap. And we don't want to make a huge investment and be like, we're dropping $1,000 on all of the cores and 6 sets of dice for every player, and then find out that we've played it for 5 sessions and realize that we don't enjoy it.
That's part of the reason why we developed the season format in the first place. It gives us a bit of a sort of it gives us a way to try something and then decide to re-up it or not, depending on how we're feeling about it as we go.
So digital copies that are cheaper, little more useful, right? That will help.
Yeah, 100%.
So there's that as well. Celtic Knots asks, how urban do you foresee the game being? Pretty urban.
Yeah,
I think that's a big part of Cyberpunk, is the idea that there just isn't a ton of not urban space left. But I do think that there's going to be the opportunity for those very classic samurai moments that I'm looking forward to, just with a little bit of an urban, hey, thanks, Abraham Ray.
Hello.
That I think with a little bit of a flair along those lines. So as an example, there's the idea of, the meeting on a bridge, right? It's quiet, the wind is blowing, the sun is just cresting over the side of the horizon, or like a garden, right? Gardens can still exist in a cyberpunk world, but they'll be quite rare. And probably if you're encountering a garden, you're in some place that's quite rich, somebody who can afford to do that.
Somebody
call you Abe?
Private
Great.
Space, yeah.
Hey, Abe. So gantry over skyscraper construction site. See, like, exactly.
Classic.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how we can do this, because I think part of the interest for me and part of the challenge for me, and hopefully for the players as well, is merging two settings in a way that it feels cool for both.
Right.
If that makes sense.
100%. Yeah, we want to make sure that we're not just taking the name of one of the two elements and everything else from the other, right? That we're essentially putting them, we are mixing them to create something greater than the sum of its parts for us. It's an important caveat. Obviously, for some people, Cyberpunk or L5R are going to be the best thing in the world, the pinnacle, and that's it. And that's for them, that's the, and that's great. And then for us, we're trying to merge them to see if we can kind of create something even more exciting for us.
Requiem Lost asks, question for me, from what I've read from L5R, how does it differ from the storyteller systems I've played in the past? Well, there's a whole bunch.
Here we go.
It uses custom dice, which is a thing, although the dice rollers that we found for it work quite well. We may not even use physical dice. We have to figure that out. I do like rolling physical dice. It's handy.
Yeah.
But it's nice, it's chunky, it's great. But the advantage to a digital dice roller is that it's fast. And oftentimes fast and contained is very useful for a streamed game. Being able to say, okay, I've already got a preset for when I'm swinging my sword, boop, there I've got my answer, can be great for a stream. Instead of counting your dice, rolling them, figuring out which dice there are, keeping them, and the like. So that is a question.
I know the question was for you, John. I think just if I jump in though, just because I think from what I've sort of seen so far, the biggest difference for me is that rather than rolling a pool of dice based on what you're trying to do, you roll a pool of dice based on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. I suppose that does exist in the storyteller system to a certain extent, but here, one's ring, which is sort of similar to the attributes in, say, Exalted Essence, really determines fundamentally how you're choosing to approach something, which I think is fascinating because then I'm also going to, my rings are going to tell me what my character is as well, right? Not just are they strong, but rather are they strong because they are tough or are they strong because they're clever, for example?
It is one thing that I'm looking forward to. If there's one thing that I like about the storyteller system is that it's a bit flexible in being able to say, okay, here's a role that I want you to do, but I can choose. Today I had somebody roll Stamina Subterfuge.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, right. That was incredible.
Which is, most of the time you'd be rolling Charisma Subterfuge or Manipulation Subterfuge. But here, Stamina Subterfuge was the thing that I thought would be most appropriate for the role, and it worked out quite well. In terms of L5R, the thing that interests me is that you no longer have a strength and intelligence and dexterity score. And I think that I kind of enjoy that concept because I don't want player characters to feel like they're so rigidly limited sometimes in terms of how they are, right? Because there's so many different kinds of intelligence and there's so many different kinds of strength and dexterity that now, instead of you saying, well, I'm this smart, instead you're thinking, well, I'm trying to do this in this particular approach. And therefore, like, I'm trying to be sneaky about this. I'm trying to be forthright. I'm trying to be, zen about this. Like,
intuitive. Yeah, exactly.
Intuitive. And that stuff is something that I think is going to be quite interesting. I'm curious to see how that pans out, especially because there is on the character sheet essentially already a cheat sheet that says if you're using this skill with this approach, it basically means this. And that's something that I'm curious about because I also know that there's ways to sort of tweak it. It's something that I was missing from the Genesis/Star Wars systems, in that the system by design was like, you always roll this ability with this attribute and that's it. And I didn't like that. And they were like, well, you can modify it sometimes, but the system wasn't actually designed to let you do that a lot. There is one element that I'm a little bit concerned about, but I'm hoping it will be okay. And that is the concept of opportunity. on the dice, you can roll successes, you can roll explosive successes, you can roll strife. Strife being a sort of a build-up in your character that then can be alleviated by, for instance, unmasking, which is basically acting against the tenets of Bushido. And then there's opportunity. And opportunity is one of those systems where it's often like, and then you can determine how this will give you an advantage going forward. It will give you an opportunity. And one thing that we bounced off of in terms of Star Wars was this concept of putting more of the narrative in the player's hands this way. But a lot of these opportunities have mechanical benefits that you can use to spend.
I was about to say, I think that's what's, again, depending on what kind of techniques you have available and so on, the core has been very clear that you can spend them for this general purpose, or if you're activating a technique or one of your special abilities,
right,
this, and this. And that's great to me because, yeah, John, like I can just foresee myself rolling 0 successes, but 3 opportunity. And I sit there and I'm like, so I didn't do it, but it good for me. You know what I mean? Like it just not useful unless I have something specific to think about.
Yeah. I think that the way that we're going to face opportunity in this particular setting is the idea that if the player has the thing they want to use the opportunity for, they can. And if not, they're just going to have the right to surrender it back to me. And I might ignore it, or I might make something happen with it, right? Like the players will have the opportunity to use opportunity, but they're not going to be required to. And they certainly aren't going to be required to say, okay, well, I succeeded opening the door, or I failed at opening the door, but it turns out that there are crates in the room, and in the crate I find a Bacta tank, right? Like we don't
that's a big crate.
That's a big ass crate.
Wow, it's also full of Bacta liquid. How did that? Anyway,
that's an expensive ass crate.
Seriously, damn.
Yeah. So that's one way. Other ways in which I'm curious to see how this is going to go. There is a bit of focus in the system on internal struggle. And I think that that's going to be interesting for the players to sort of handle. One of the things that I'm going to have to make sure of when we're creating our characters, though, is to make sure that these systems aren't completely ignored. If somebody wants to play where they unmask constantly so strife never matters, that must be okay, but there must be repercussions for it. And the repercussions can't be repercussions that the players don't care about. So as an example, if you're basically saying, well, I don't give a shit about any of the tenets of Bushido at all. I do what I want. I do it whenever I want. And I literally don't care about anything. If that's the case, I don't want to make it so then the players just basically toss that entire concept out the window because they don't have to deal with it anymore. And that removes a big part of the mechanics, but also removes a big part of the flavor. So I do want the players to care about Bushido, but not necessarily dictate how or why they care about it.
Yeah, the sort of I immediately and again, it's because we were playing Exalted recently, but I immediately took to the concept of strife as similar to the concept of limit from Exalted Third. Except that limit is something you only ever build up in very specific, you build it up more slowly.
Right.
And then when you reach your 10 in Exalted Third, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for Solars, I'm thinking specifically.
Yeah.
Whereas here, every time you roll dice, there's I think a relatively strong possibility you're going to accumulate some strife. So unmasking has to be a viable way to get rid of it, because there are downsides to having too much strife as well, because that's the other side of the coin, John, right? Like, oh well, I'll just keep all my strife because who cares? Well, it reduces certain stats,
Right. And the interesting thing is that because in this dice system you pick which dice you want to keep, sometimes you'll be like, well, I can succeed at this roll, but I have to take strife as a result.
I love that. Fun choices for sure. And again, Turtle's right. Like, there has to be a reason within the setting why again, unmasking is a big deal, or why Bushido needs to be, if not respected, then at least like have lip service paid to it.
Yeah.
What happens to you if you don't? And that, you're right, John, that needs to be clear to us, and we need to be clear why, so that when we're doing character creation, we're like, well, I have a duty, but like I don't really care about it.
One of the things that I draw some parallel to is the idea that when Star Wars first came out, people got excited about it, and there was this also these hints at this idea of like, what are Jedi and what's their deal? And then the prequels came out, and I distinctly remember after Episode 1 and before Episode 2 came out, there were posters that came out that says like, a Jedi is not allowed to love, and it showed, you know, Hayden Christensen telling Natalie Portman about how much he hates sand.
And so broody. Yeah.
So broody. And I never liked the idea that they were just like, oh yeah, Jedi as a whole, these people who you like looked up to and thought were cool, yeah, they're not allowed to actually love. Like, I was like, that sucks. But what I would prefer to see is more along the lines of like, love is not something that helps you as a Jedi. Specifically, it might help you as a person, but you kind of have to counterbalance it, because if you show up to the Jedi Council and you're like, well, I'm not going to go off and rescue this planet because I
have dinner with the wife.
My husband is at home and he's bored. You know, like there may be.
So we're going to go to the spa, you know, like.
Right. So there is a certain amount of like, oh, okay, so I think that's a little bit of how we might look at it. Your clan will absolutely care about your score. Like I'll put that out there right now. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there's like, it's also hard to look at Bushido and be like, this is all bullshit. Like, what's bullshit about being nice to someone? What's, you know, like that's
to agree. That's
what the hell? Like
courtesy
really is in there, and then you could be like, courtesy sucks, and I'm like, all right, fine. But there's got to be some parts of it that you like and some parts of it that you don't. But it is also potentially a realization that you can't affect as much change if you fight too hard against the AI above you. Mm-hmm. You know, you won't be able to help your community, your world, unless you can prove yourself as a samurai. So there are questions along in there. Being nice to someone sucks, says the Scorpion. Well, very much so.
Hey.
Erytheus asked this question right at the beginning. We're going to bring it out here because I think it's a good one. John, how much of what John presents in session is prep and what's improv? I'd be curious as to what session prep you do beyond being good at improv acting. Scott?
Sorry. Well, John wakes up every day and looks in the mirror and goes, you are good at improv acting. And that's the prep.
And then great. I choose violence.
Every time. No, well, I mean, I can speak for myself. I certainly can't speak for you, John. And I imagine this is from your perspective. I can certainly speak for myself in the sense that, like, having run a few one-shots here and there, I find it very important to go in with a sense of what are the major sort of either plot or thematic points I want to get to in that session, and offering routes to get there. So if the players are all kind of sitting around being like, well, I don't know, like we just went to the beach, you know, like, well, I don't know, like they're not sure what to do, you can offer either an emergency or a suggestion to get them to that next stage, and then taking cues from the players about how they want to approach something is the way that, exactly.
My prep is not involved in making hard choices. It's involved in making sure I understand. How do I make this clearer? I want to know what the universe is like, and I want to know what characters are like, so that if they're confronted by an unknown, I can extrapolate. But I often try not to make too much in terms of like hard prep. Hard prep to me then limits my options, and I don't like being limited. But obviously there are certain things that I am going to have to do to prepare. unfamiliarity with the system means that I can't just kind of be like, I can randomly create an NPC foe off the top of my head in 15 seconds because they happen to be facing one and I know the rolls that I have to make. I may have to prepare some basic NPCs so that if they do get involved in something like combat, then I know, okay, well, here are the stats that I have, and I'll have those written down for me in advance. Because I've been running World of Darkness stuff for decades. I can do that. I literally can do it in my head. For this, I won't be able to, not right away. And I'll want to leave a lot of patches open because I want the players to be able to affect it. If I say, okay, well, I'm going to prep the dungeon that the players are going to attack, and then one of them says, hey, I want to check to see if this dungeon has a bathroom. If I've forgotten to put a bathroom in the plans, well, instantly I'll be like, fuck, of course a dungeon would have a bathroom. Like, if not for the prisoners, then definitely for the guards. And then I'm like, but they're not on my map. Right? Now,
it's too bad, I guess.
For a lot of people, this is how they want to play, and that's totally fine. I don't tend to write out what I want to have happen in a session. I go in with ideas of what I'd like to see. And if my players go in those directions, fantastic. And if they don't, I try to catch up as best I can. But the way that I catch up easily, the way that I am a good improv actor, is that I do a lot of internal thinking between sessions so that I understand the universe enough that I can catch up fast.
Something that, John, if I can tack on there, something that has happened in sessions before, because you're not the kind of storyteller who makes like scale models of where we are at all times. Which can be super cool. Which can be super cool. No. That's not coming down on it. In fact, what ends up happening sometimes is I find myself spatially lost. Where am I? Is there cover? Can I get to this other thing? And so we've developed, I guess, in a way, a bit of a system where we kind of maybe just assume you can, or we ask if you can do something, right? As opposed to, no, but hang on, how many feet am I from the door? Because my range is this. As opposed to that being like, okay, well, I'm going to head further away so that I'm at a certain range for my weapon, whatever it is.
Right. I'll tell you this much. If we ever get to the point, and I really don't think we will, but if we ever for some reason got to the point where we had like enough money to pay all four of us to quit our jobs and just do this, maybe at some point we'll buy a 3D printer, like a laser CNC, and we'll do fucking miniature games.
Damn.
Because some of that might be super cool. But for now, yeah.
Kate particularly, I think, would enjoy the crafting.
I think there's a lot to be said about crafting. It's great, but who has the time? Who has the time?
That's me, John. I love the idea of cosplay, and then when it comes time, I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't even go to the store. Like, do you know what I mean?
What do you mean? I can't just put on a costume. I have to do some work.
I have to have it.
What?
What is this?
But also, I know that part of the joy of cosplaying is in the creation of the costume. Like, I don't want to just go to a costume store and buy the costume and put it on, right? Like,
That's it, exactly.
So it's
and
tough.
Customizing it and so on. Anyway,
so what I recommend is find somebody who you could pay in making dinner. We'll see. Look, cosplay is great. I don't mean that, but yeah, I totally get you there. Scott, there's a question for you.
Yes.
Of the stuff not talked about yet, what part of the Alphavar setting are you looking for to see how it is moved into NeoRokugan? My personal is how the clans will be presented, specifically Unicorn.
I've seen this come up a few times. The Unicorn clan, for those not in the know, is one of the clans in L5R. They came riding in from who knows where, bringing with them this sort of, to use the term, barbarous like nature, because they've been living outside the confines of civilization or whatever for so long. And there's some questions about maybe in the near future, well, where would you go? That seems really far away. Interesting. I can tell you right away, the thing, because this always excites me a lot when I'm creating, conceptualizing characters, I use some of my basic stats my attributes and my abilities as a way into developing the character, but I also start to look at, okay, what kind of special techniques, magic, whatever, feats, what kind of thing would this person know to give myself some flavor. Changeling backgrounds, for example, advantages and disadvantages, were integral to the creation of Braum. I think you would agree, John. Amnesia, dark enemy, and whatever the other one was, flashbacks were my 3 flaws, and that was essentially my character for a long time. It's great, good stuff. I'm most looking forward to the techniques, kata, invocations, that sort of thing, how they are going to become transplanted into the new setting, what it means, what the implications are. Because there are some invocations that have to do with how you fight in combat, but also how you affect people. Is there some sort of neural link that's being developed? I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see how that works. I'm not going to go through the book and update them all myself, obviously, but I am going to start to think really heavily about, okay, if I'm from this school, I have access to these techniques. What could they look like in this system? And I will be proposing those to John.
Something that you touched on, and I'll bring up here. One of the things that I'm using as inspiration is actually the world of Horizon, in that outside the city, what the game calls spirits and strange beings, things like examples in the back of the book are like forest trolls, air kami, kirin. These will actually be mechanical beings that are no longer under the AI control. The AI have helped to create a NeoRokugan to let people live in relative peace and harmony, but yet at the same time there are these mechs that are trying to get in that their own artificial intelligences may be minor, that certain clans are going to have to defend against, notably Crab, right?
Yep.
The wall will still exist. Yeah, Carb hold the line.
Carb hold the line. Carbs hold my line every day.
I have to hold the line against Carbs. And so the idea then would be that that these beings would still exist, but that they would have these kinds of mechanical counterparts. So Unicorn can exist from outside the city and come back in, but they've been living in an entirely different world.
I think that's fascinating. You know how I feel about the world of Horizon. I feel very positively about it. I really enjoyed the game. I look forward to Forbidden West. And I think if there's something that we want to get inspired by, that's going to be really cool. Really cool. Carbohydrates.
Oh, did Kung Fu Fenris send me something about?
Yes, I believe so. About spending opportunity and possibly a podcast that's doing a Cyberpunk update to L5R. I'm just catching snippets in the chat here.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Part of it is one of the things that I do want to see the how to use and speed up opportunity results. That's actually really useful that Kung Fu Fender sent. I often will deliberately not look at setting information that is similar to what I'm trying to build because I don't want to rip things off or worry that I'm ripping things off. So we will see. But there might be some interesting things in there. Part of that is just my own worry, and I don't want to look like I'm like, haha, well, I came up with all of this independently, but I also need to stop worrying that I'm like, but I have to make it now too different from something else. Like, it's
That's
okay.
it, right?
People can have different ideas.
In fact, I feel like that's a pretty it's a recorded phenomenon, especially in films, right? There's very similar films tend to come in pairs. Every few years or so, you get 2 blockbusters that are almost essentially the same movie back to back. It's interesting. I find that fascinating.
Um, yeah. Makes sense. We're getting clear of questions. So if anybody has any additional questions, just throw them in there. Because we can also, we can flit away early if we so choose. But it seems like you've got some ideas of the sort of characters that you're looking at. We will be modifying the 20 questions. What's the big evil? I'm not ready to talk about that. I don't talk about the big evil before character creation. And oftentimes I'll look at character creation and realize, oh, this is the game that my players want to play. And then the big evil changes.
I'm interested in what you mean by we're adapting the 20 questions. Can you speak more to that, or should we wait for character creation?
So character creation, very specifically, the character creation is the game of 20 questions. That's how you create a character in this in this setting. And I will be modifying the game of 20 questions in order to, still in terms of trying to do the least amount of change possible, but to make sure that we still follow that, because I really like the idea of the character creation. You make choices about your history, and that sort of fills out your character sheet for you.
I absolutely love that as well.
Especially because we're new to this setting and these mechanics. Kate has played a little bit of L5R in the past, but in being new or somewhat new to this, having this sort of guide us through it, I think will be an interesting way to sort of get into it without instantly first trying to figure out how do I manipulate these mechanics to get done exactly what I want. I will say that one thing that I'm still at some point hoping to do is possibly even play the L5R card game with you, knowing that there's an implementation of it that exists based on Jinteki.
Right. Yeah, sorry, I wrote that down at some point, and I think that's could be very interesting to try that out.
Because we straight up bought the L5R latest edition core at Gen Con when it released. And then we were like, Netrunner's over here. We just played that instead.
I feel like that was there was a specific data pack, or it was a big box that was a deluxe that was like only available at Gen Con. And I think that was the same Gen Con where I was very excited.
No, we didn't. We bought Game of Thrones.
Oh, it was Game of Thrones. Because there was a new edition,
Game of Thrones.
Right?
But L5R as a game, I'm still curious about it. I'll have a look, knowing that I don't have to invest a ton of money into it at this point.
I have thought something sort of to discuss as well, but I see that there's a question here which might be interesting to answer.
But what is the thing that you want to discuss? The question will remain.
The question will remain. Just because you mentioned, adapting 20 questions, doing character creation, trying not to quote unquote game the system, as it were. Something that, because these seasons tend to have the format of Jon is the storyteller, we three are PCs. Kate and Liz and I like to discuss and bounce character ideas off of each other before we even get to character creation, just to know, at least in my mind, it's just to make sure that we're not all three thinking about doing stealth archers. I don't know, whatever.
Right.
Who cares? Mr. Talkie Talk. But so that yes, I know there's an element of let's make sure our bases are covered in terms of, okay, we have to have someone who can talk to people, whatever. But I'd
argue you don't have to, but yeah.
No, that's it.
It is my intention. It is my intention to run through the game of 20 questions with each of you. But it is also my intention that you are aware of the game of 20 questions and that you'll be able to discuss general things. Like, for instance, it's possible that all three of you would like to play of the same clan. And that would be an interesting way of going about it, in which case I'm very happy to facilitate that. But it also could be that all three of you want to play different clans. And you'll be aware as you go through the game of 20 questions that there are questions like, what clan are you? In which case, you'll have had that discussion beforehand in order to make sure that you can create a unique enough character, or at least a character that goes according to the plan that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. That'll be great. Yeah, I naturally, I want to make sure that we're all unique. We also, I know the three of us as players like to try to do something that is as different as possible from our previous character. It's not diametrically opposed always, but often quite different. I'm fascinated. I'm really interested to see what people's minds are going to come up with in this setting.
So, but you bring up a very good point, and I do want to make sure that the three of you have the chance to coordinate and come up with things separately. It has worked for us in the past, and I do think that there is something special about it. The one thing that I'm going to insist on this time around, a lesson that I have learned, is to really insist that people fight for what they want more. And the reason why I say that is that I think that it's very often that someone will say, I want to play a stealth archer, and someone else would be like, oh, one of the things that I was thinking about was stealth archer. Well, now I can't do that. Now I have to find something else to play. And then they're like, they've thrown out this entire character without realizing that first person who said, I want to play a stealth archer, was also just as likely to play a barbarian. Mm-hmm. And they just were like, oh, I picked the first thing that came out of my mouth, but I didn't care about that. Meanwhile, the other player's like, fuck, that's all I wanted to do in this life.
Grumble, yeah.
Or you could even be like, okay, well, you're both stealth archers. Maybe you're sisters, and you attended the same academy, and you've learned together, but there are ways to differentiate your characters, right? So it's important to me that when we discuss these things, that players openly advocate for the things that they really want and the things that they are interested in, but can definitely be okay with not doing, or alternately things where someone can say, I do not want to play this. And then we can move forward from there.
Clan choice, for example, is something that I understand that there are ramifications in terms of your school, in terms of your starting stats, and in terms of the background of your character, the sort of raison d'etre of that clan or whatever. Mm-hmm. I understand there's a lot of ramifications, but that's one of those things that, for example, I can see a couple different character concepts fit into a couple different clans. I'm not married to anything.
Yeah.
I think it's fat.
The game itself actually has a very different flavor if all three players are in the same clan versus different clans, because different clans have different goals, right? And if all three of you decide to be in different clans, then I have to come up with a reason to keep the three of you together, which is not overly difficult, but it is something that I have to figure out. Alternately, maybe two of you are the same clan and one of you is not. Exalted Academy, two of you are with Cathak, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there are questions that we do have to resolve along those lines. So it is... hey, thanks for being here, Aramithius. It was great to have you. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But yeah, it is, I think, important that we take into account that people have the right to play the characters that they're interested in. And I don't think anybody wants to prevent people, but as somebody, I personally really like playing the gap, right? Yeah. If I'm sometimes in the past I've been invited to join a game and they're like, well, we have a this and a this and a this, and I'll very much be like, I need to know what people are so that I can not be any of those things, because I enjoy that in a lot of ways. But part of that is also my storyteller brain thinking like, oh, well, maybe it would be advantageous for the game itself to have this represented. But I also have to get out of that mindset sometimes, because sometimes it's just got to be like, no, what do I actually want to play? And maybe it's okay. Written as Wrote asks, will there be much law enforcement in the world, or do the clans rule effectively? I haven't figured that out. I imagine that it will be very similar to how it's portrayed in the core. But we'll see, because it kind of depends on the AI that are involved.
Yeah, you would, right? Absolutely. And potentially also, just to tie it back in, depending on where the characters kind of start and their reason for being there, based on their clans and their goals and their, maybe they're more in the sort of a wilder part of the setting, or maybe they're in a wealthier part of the setting, right, where law enforcement would be like less or more present. I think it just might depend.
Yep.
Fascinating.
And that's okay. Any other questions? In the meantime, we'll just we'll start wrapping it up here. Scott, do you have a stream going on tomorrow?
What day is it? Today is Thursday. Yes.
Thursday
Yeah. Oh my!
You can tell who
Sorry.
doesn't have a normal 9-to-5 job and who does in this call.
Whoops. In this economy? Yes, tomorrow at 1800 Eastern. It's the one that started it all. It's Punchy over on twitch.tv/Elizabeth A. Neal. We're continuing Mass Effect 2. I believe we're reaching the end of the game. I honestly couldn't tell you. I think so, though.
Did you reach the bangening?
No, not yet. Although there were some hilarious scenes where the chosen Bang-Yi, so to speak, was kind of like, whoa, let me research how this is going to work and get back to you, waggles eyebrows. Very odd. I love it. On Saturday as well, you can join us back on that same channel at 1500. Liz and I read Nancy Drew books and we do silly voices. We also make each other cry with laughter on a pretty regular basis.
It's the feel-good stream of the week for me.
I
agree.
agree. Yeah.
It's
we're currently reading The Mystery of Lilac Inn, which I still say is not the best book we've read, but I'm willing to be convinced. It's pretty sweet, but I'm willing to be convinced. And then normally I stream on Saturday nights. I'm taking a break because I just finished a campaign, but you can catch me again soon with a new solo campaign of Arkham Horror, the card game, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Or do we roleplay L5R while we battle it out?
Oh my gosh. I might need to know a little bit more about the setting and the deck before I do that,
Yeah,
I'm going to make all these strong choices and then I draw only like warriors or whatever.
We'll
I don't know
see.
the game.
Well,
yeah.
thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
It's
do you have
easier
any
to
thoughts?
run clinic hours when there's another person.
I absolutely get that, John, 100%.
Oh.
Do we have anything we want to mention to people about Sunday at 1700?
There's going to be a stream
on this channel.
Yeah, on
There
this
is?
channel at 1700 Eastern. I just don't know what game it's going to be yet.
Yeah.
But there will be a stream. There will be a game.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're doing one-shots and mini campaigns for now. As we mentioned at the top of the stream, things have changed pretty quickly. We had plans and they've been upended. And
Fuck.
that's it. Maybe it moves our new season up. Maybe it moves it further back. We're going to find out. But yes, we're very much we played the very important task last Sunday, and it was, I was like, moving into 2022 with this level of humor is exactly where I want to be right now. So that felt good. That felt really good.
Yeah, that was great. It would be great if we could do this with the other players. That's the plan.
That's the plan.
That's
You get
the
3
plan.
episode -1s and then an episode 0 and 3 character creations. John, you're set for content on this channel forever. It's going to be great.
There we go. That's all that matters. Folks, it is always good to see you here. We hope to see you on some of those streams that we mentioned. But look, you've been watching Clinic Hours long enough to know, and even if this is your first time, you know that it's not the easiest way to deal with your problems, but it is often the best way, is to just use your word hole.
Mm-hmm.
See you next time.